What's more beneficial to your March Madness seeding? Regular season championships or conference tournament championships?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Wednesday, February 21st, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and I want to thank you for joining us to get your Tar Heels content every day. Seriously, thank you for making us your first listen or watch. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Hey, look, my voice is maybe slightly getting better. Thanks for sticking with me through it all. Hey, look, great news. For the first Tuesday in the last 4 Tuesdays, Carolina didn't lose last night. Great. That's because they didn't play. But still, they didn't lose on a Tuesday night. Legitimately, I've got good news for you. North Carolina could clinch not only a top 4 seed, but a top 3 ACC tournament seed this Saturday. How? I'll tell you later on in the show. Plus, should Coach Davis be in line not only for ACC Coach of the Year, but for National Coach of the Year? We got some great mailbag questions to unpack for you in segments 2 and 3 today. Or excuse me, in not segment 3, segment 2, and right now in segment 1. This first question that'll kind of be our talking point for segment 1 comes from Teflon Chef on Discord, our Discord community. If you're not part of that, you need to come join it. It's free. It's awesome. We hang out and talk Tar Heels all day long. The link for it's in the show notes. Teflon Chef asks this question. Which is better for your NCAA tournament seeding? Winning a regular season championship or winning a conference tournament championship? It's a great question that a lot of people might be wondering. And so I want to unpack my own thoughts about it. Let's start here. I am historically, infinitely a bigger believer in regular season championships mattering, again, infinitely more than conference tournament championships for multiple reasons. I think it shows that you have more depth as a team. I think it shows that you have better coaching. I think it shows that you have more longevity and that you can sustain success across a period of months, not just 4 days or 3 days or 5 days, whatever it is. But some of that power of the regular season has been taken away recently because unlike when the ACC was 9 teams and you played 16 conference games, a true home and home round robin where you played all of the other 8 teams, both at your place and theirs, that ain't the same anymore. So that to me has taken some of the power away from the regular season championship. And that's unfortunate. That's why I kind of, was advocating, I think it was yesterday's show, for like, what if we looked at something like, sure, we're going to 18 teams, but we have 2 subdivisions of 9. You play 16 conference games against the other 8 in your subdivision, home and away, and then 4 games against the other subdivision, 2 home, 2 away. I think that could be a neat way to do it. Just thinking about that. Now, I will say this. None of that, the 20-game schedule and playing fewer teams twice, doesn't make me put more weight on the ACC tournament. I still weight the ACC tournament essentially the same as always. But it does make me put less weight on the ACC regular season championship. Both of those things can be true and are. So even with the unbalanced schedule that we now have in conference play, I still do put more stock on a regular season championship than a conference tournament championship. It's just I put less stock in it than I used to. But to the question specifically about NCAA tournament seeding and which of the 2 championships affects it more, that's the question from Teflon Chef. So let's look at it. I want to break the season, at least the part of the season prior to the NCAA tournament, into 3 segments because we do have the conference tournament. We do have the conference regular season before that, but I also don't want to forget the non-conference portion of the schedule because that plays also a critical factor in answering your question. of what plays, the biggest factors in NCAA tournament seeding. Because here's the truth. Both the non-conference part of the schedule and the conference regular season are the two chunks of your schedule that play the most role in determining your NCAA tournament seeding, with the conference tournament being kind of a third afterthought a little bit. And I'll explain more about that in a second. But both non-con and the conference regular season do more for your NCAA tournament seeding. So what about non-conference play? Well, it's critical to show a willingness to play difficult games and to win them. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you have to win basketball games. So there's this balance of what can my team handle, playing enough tough games that you're going to go out and do that. Let me just pull up KenPom, for example, and look at the non-conference strength of schedule. North Carolina's is 39th. That's really good. But let's look at the top 3 teams in the nation right now in terms of seeding. That would be, in terms of this week's AP poll, UConn, Houston, Purdue. Here's something that's going to separate these 3 teams. Purdue's non-conference strength of schedule is 10th. Houston's is 228. UConn's is 286. So if it comes down to it, and these 3 teams are basically identical on Selection Sunday, the tournament committee is going to look at that non-conference strength of schedule and say, yeah, it's Purdue. That's part of why Purdue was number 1 in Saturday's bracket reveal. So that's part of it that you need to be aware of. And so in non-con, you need to be willing to play the tough games, but you also have to be capable of winning them. That's going to help Carolina, because they did quite well for themselves in the non-conference portion of the schedule. That's part of why they were the number 5 overall seed on Saturday in that reveal. 8-3 in non-con, the losses just being to the neutral site to Nova, neutral site to Kentucky, as well as UConn at Madison Square Garden. And then the other part is the conference regular season. This is 20 games of your 31 regular season games. So this matters a ton. A lot of people kind of lock you into what they think you are in non-con play, but that's only 11 of the 31 regular season games. Conference play is where you really, really cement who you are. So this part of the season that we're in right now is the most critical in terms of NCAA tournament seeding. And what's really impressive about what Carolina is doing is not only are they leading the ACC, but they're doing so while playing a much more difficult schedule than the other top competitors in the conference. So there's a website, playoffstatus.com. And one of the things they show is relative difficulty of conference schedule against the rest as compared to that's what I want to say, the rest of the conference. So it just looks at basically the winning percentage of all your opponents as compared to all the other teams. Looking at that, Carolina has the second most difficult ACC schedule. The only team with a more difficult is State. So, okay, great. What about those other 2 schools that are really close to Carolina in the ACC standings, being Duke and Virginia? Well, let me just tell you. Duke's strength of ACC schedule is 12th out of 15. That means only 3 schools are worse. How about Virginia? Dead last. Virginia has the easiest strength of ACC schedule. And Carolina's is second hardest. And yet the Tar Heels are above both Duke and Virginia right now. So that speaks to the committee as well. They're looking at all of these things, not just where you finished, but how tough was your conference schedule in an unbalanced schedule, right? And keep in mind that Carolina doesn't have to play themselves, the best team in the conference. So that's part of it as well. Way to go, Tar Heels. So then, directly to your question, whether the ACC regular season championship or ACC tournament championship does more. Let me give you a little metaphor for it. It's like on an instrument that comes with both a bigger knob and a smaller knob. Think like a microscope or a camera. On a microscope, there's a big knob for large adjustments for, getting focus. And then there's the smaller fine adjustment knob to just really dial in a little bit more. So think about it in terms of that. The bigger broad knob is the regular season, where you really kind of start to be put into place within a range. And then if there's any little bit more of adjustment to do, the conference tournament can do that. So maybe like Carolina's either going to be a 2 or a 3 seed, but just a matter of whether they are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 would be those top 2, 3, right? So it just really helps really fine tune you into where you would go. Or if you're on the bubble, are you in? Are you out? Do you have a bye? Do you have to go to the play-in games? That's what the conference tournament can do, is just 1, 2, maybe 3 more opportunities to really put a stamp on who you are. Now, in terms of actually winning it, that's held in really high esteem. But again, regular season held in much more high esteem than the conference tournament championship. That's a great question. Thank you so much for it, Teflon Chef. Now, speaking of the great season Carolina is having, what a great job Coach Hubert Davis has done this season. I mean, phenomenal. Claps from me. But there is still more to be done. Is what he's already done, plus what he's going to do enough to earn him some Coach of the Year votes? We'll talk about that in just a second. Right after I tell you that this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Look, we are just 3 weeks away from the Power Conference college basketball tournaments. And maybe you don't have tickets, but you know that your team is going to go on a wild run. Game Time would be the perfect place to get last-minute tickets so that you don't miss out on all that excitement. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, plus music or comedy, theater, whatever it is at the events near you. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and a best price guarantee. With all of that, Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. I love this little feature that they have. Game Time has zone deals. You pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and when you do it that way, big time savings coming your way. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time, where you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's $20 off your first purchase at Game Time with code LOCKEDON. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, another question coming to us from our Discord. This one comes from Steven, PH, not a V. Get it right, folks. Steven says this: at this point in the season, should HD be considered to be favorite to be Coach of the Year? If not, where do you have him stand? Excuse me. Now, Steven didn't specify National Coach of the Year or ACC Coach of the Year, so I'm going to unpack both of those because I think both are great questions. If we're talking National Coach of the Year, I don't know if he'll win, and we probably won't fully know the answer on exactly who that is until we get a little deeper into the season, seeing regular season results, conference tournament results. But I do think already we can say, Steven, and others who might be wondering, Hubert Davis is going to get some National Coach of the Year votes. I'm telling you that, unless things just fall off a cliff, which there's no reason to expect them to. Let me say this, though. Exactly how many votes he gets probably depends on the rest of the season, how Carolina does both in the regular season and ACC tournament and in the NCAA tournament, but that's depending upon the outlet. And here's why I say that. Some outlets vote like at the end of the regular season or at the end of conference tournaments. Some outlets like CBS, I know, waits till like the Final Four or like right after the championship game to then cast their votes. So for example, last year, most outlets didn't have FAU's coach as their Coach of the Year. But then because of that run, well, look who's voted at CBS, right? So that's kind of dependent upon it too. Now, that's national. If we're talking ACC, there's no reason why he couldn't or shouldn't be considered the favorite right now. I'll talk more about that in a second. So let's say this let's go back to talking National Coach of the Year for a minute. Here's what bugs me about these type of awards at the conference and national level. A lot of times it's not given to a coach who it's like, Hey, your team was supposed to be awesome, and they were awesome. I think that should be just as important because you did the recruiting work to build an awesome team, and then you held it together and did what people expected you to do. Why shouldn't that be equally as awarded as something like, oh man, your team was supposed to be terrible and you made it to middling? Like, why is that type of coach getting coach of the year? That makes zero sense to me. Now, I get it. If it's a coach that's supposed to be, let's say it's the ACC, there's 15 teams, your team is picked 13th and you finish second, absolutely you should get that award. But just some of the way these go just make zero sense to me. So let's look at this. I'll break it into some categories and give you a couple examples of some people that'll get some votes at the national coach of the year level. So here's the category. Lost a lot, but their team is still awesome this year. Two candidates I'll give you for that. Dan Hurley, UConn. Look, UConn won the national championship last year. We all know that. I mean, just absolutely boat race their way through the NCAA tournament. Dan Hurley's going to get votes because UConn lost, in my opinion, their three most important players from last year's team. And yet, I know what just happened to them at Creighton on Tuesday night. Boy, that was a whooping. But despite that, UConn is right there as one of the favorites to repeat and win the national championship. So for keeping his team where they're at, despite those losses, he'll get votes. Similar thing for Nate Oates. I know that Alabama didn't win the national championship last year, but they were the number one overall seed going into the NCAA tournament. He loses 5 of his top 6 scores, including 2 first-round draft picks. He also, oh, by the way, lost all 3 of his assistant coaches to be head coaches elsewhere. And yet, the Crimson Tide right now, alone atop the SEC standings. That's impressive stuff. I don't care who you are. So Nate Oates is going to get national votes. What about like a coach whose team was expected to be really, really, really bad and is doing pretty well? An example of that is Lamont Paris at South Carolina. I think the Gamecocks were picked dead last in the SEC, and they're right up near the front runners right now. And they've kind of fallen off a little bit the past week, but still, he's going to get votes because of that. What about some coaches that are doing really well out of the gate at new places? That's another category of coach that gets some votes. I'll give you 2 examples of that. Number 1, Danny Sprinkle at Utah State. Utah State is in the Mountain West, and that conference is having a really good season. And that's San Diego State that is, who's expected to come back and do really well again. Well, Utah State beat San Diego State Tuesday night and now sits alone atop the Mountain West Conference standings. So Danny Sprinkle is going to get some national votes. Another guy in that same boat, Amir Abdur-Rahim, who is the coach at South Florida. Now, you might remember that name because last year he took Kennesaw State to the NCAA tournament with 26 wins in his 4th season. Why is that important? Because in his first season at Kennesaw State, the Owls had just 1 win. That's a turnaround. Now he's at South Florida. What are they doing? Oh, no big deal. They're in first place in the AAC. You might remember that's the same conference that Memphis is in. Nope, ahead of them. Memphis has done terribly lately. FAU. Nope, they're ahead of them. In fact, they just beat them this weekend. South Florida. So Amir Abdur-Rahim going to get some votes. 2 other categories let me give you. New conference, same result. That's Kelvin Sampson in Houston. They just came over from the AAC, and they're alone atop the Big 12, the best basketball conference in America this year. That's impressive. Did that after they and Iowa State were tied. They beat Iowa State on Monday night. How about this one? Expected to be awesome and is, while also rebounding from being just the second ever 1 seed to lose to a 16 last year. That's Matt Painter at Purdue. And I know, there's always the like, oh, I don't trust Purdue. Oh, whatever. Matt Painter to bring his team back like Tony Bennett did from that disappointment to get all these guys back. They've got remember I just told you they have the 10th most difficult non-conference strength of schedule. The Big Ten is not the most difficult conference this year, but it's 3rd or 4th, and they're navigating it really well. They've only got 3 losses. So Matt Painter's going to get votes. So those are some other candidates for National Coach of the Year. What about ACC Coach of the Year? Look, here's the thing with the ACC. Everybody's pretty much doing what they were expected to do with some slight variations up and down. No teams that were supposed to be terrible are awesome. for the most part, again, just we are what we were expected to be. There's no first-year coaches that are making a big go of it. Syracuse is, Georgia Tech, Notre Dame at the bottom. All three of those teams are in the bottom 6 right now. So for me, I think that Hubert Davis is, to your question, the front runner right now. If Carolina wins the regular season, I say lock it up. That's Hubert Davis's ACC award. Even if Carolina ties for first, and maybe even second would be enough. Because another thing that people often vote for is the rebound. Look at what happened to Carolina last year. Look at them picked, I think, preseason 3rd behind Duke and Miami. Miami, woof. And so Hubert Davis, absolutely to me, is the front runner right now and has a great opportunity to lock up that award. Speaking of which, Carolina has a big potential opportunity this weekend in terms of establishing position for ACC tournament seeding. What exactly is that? Oh, I'm going to share it with you in just a second. Right after I tell you that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The wait is almost over in North Carolina because FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, is coming to the Tar Heels state. On March 11th, you'll finally be able to bet on all your favorite teams in all your favorite sports. With FanDuel, there's a whole bunch of different ways for you to get in on the action. You can bet on everything from the money line to over-unders to which team's going to win the second iteration of this year's Tobacco Road rivalry. And you know the right answer for that one. All of that on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, with live betting, you can even pick which player's going to score the next bucket or the one after that. So come see for yourself why FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon so that you can be the first to know when FanDuel goes live in North Carolina. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel. All right, I want to take stock of the ACC basketball men's standings because there was some, results on Tuesday night. So I started looking all right, what's going on with seeding scenarios? Where's Carolina's at? Because I'm always tracking that. Coming even into Tuesday night's play, Carolina had already clinched no worse than 9th. 6 teams: Louisville, Boston College, Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, Miami, and Virginia Tech. All of those 6 could not mathematically pass Carolina already. So that means that Carolina has clinched no worse than 9th, which means they've already clinched at least one round bye, and will not start play until Wednesday of ACC Tournament week. So I started to think, all right, is it possible? How far up could Carolina go this weekend with the rest of the action? And here's what I discovered. It is possible, and not even outside of the realm of wild possibility, that the Tar Heels could go ahead and lock up a double bye this weekend. And seriously, they only need 4 different results to go right for that to happen. One of which is themselves winning. So what I want to do is talk you through that, what it looks like, how Carolina could pull off going ahead and getting that double bye as soon as Saturday. Let me tell you, here's what has to happen. First off, Carolina has to win their game at Virginia. Plain and simple, make that happen. If so, Carolina's record will move to 13-3. That means, and this will be critical for unpacking this, that Carolina's worst possible finish, if they beat Virginia on Saturday, is 13-7. That means that anyone that has 8 or more losses can't mathematically surpass Carolina, and anyone that has 7 losses but Carolina holds the tiebreaker against, also Carolina has surpassed them. So here's what that means. If Carolina beats Virginia on Saturday, that puts Carolina above Syracuse, who already has 8 losses. That means Carolina's worst possible finish now changes to 8th. That also puts Carolina above Pittsburgh, who has 7 losses, but Carolina holds the tiebreaker, and above Florida State, who has 7 losses, but Carolina holds the tiebreaker. That means that Carolina's worst possible finish, regardless of what any other team does, already, if Carolina beats Virginia, they move from a worst possible finish of 9th to 6th, just on their win alone on Saturday. I'm serious. Doesn't matter anything else that happens. But here are a couple other results that could help bump it up even more. Duke plays at Wake Forest on Saturday. If Duke wins that game, that would give Wake 7 losses, and Carolina holds that tiebreaker. That means Carolina's worst possible finish would then be 5th. But here's the deal with that one. Are we ever really going to be that mad if Duke loses a basketball game, even if it means it helps our ACC tournament seeding momentarily? Nah. So go ahead, Wake Forest. Do work. We can wait a little bit to clinch a top 4 seed. But seriously, either result there helps, but Duke winning at Wake Forest goes ahead and helps us clinch a top 4 this weekend. Obviously, though, if Wake beats Duke, it gives the Tar Heels some buffer in the top of the standings. So that's the next result. Here's another one. Boston College plays at NC State on Saturday. If BC wins that game, that would give State 8 losses, meaning they're behind Carolina, can't mathematically surpass them. And that would mean Carolina's worst possible finish is now 4th, which means double bye and you don't start until Thursday. Oh, but wait, it gets even better because there's another result that would help Carolina get all the way up to no worse than 3rd. Clemson has 2 more games this week. They play at Georgia Tech tonight, and then they host Florida State on Saturday. If Clemson loses either of those games, it doesn't even have to be both of them. Just losing one of them gets them to 8 losses, meaning that they couldn't mathematically surpass the Tar Heels, even if Carolina doesn't beat Virginia on Saturday, getting them to 8. Well, no, actually, I'd take that back. That's wrong. Carolina would still, because we don't hold the tiebreaker over Clemson yet. So anyway, but Carolina win mixed with Clemson losing either of those games means that Carolina's worst possible finish with all of these things happening would be 3rd. That is bonkers. That means the only 2 teams that Carolina will not have eliminated yet are Virginia and Duke. And that means all Carolina would have to do, because Virginia at that point would have 6 losses and Carolina would hold the tiebreaker. Again, if they beat Virginia, that means just one more victory in the final 4 games means your worst possible finish is 2nd, because then you would eliminate Virginia. Pretty crazy stuff. So really, all this to say, if Carolina wins Saturday and then just 2 of these other 3 results happen, Carolina will have clinched a top 4 seed in the ACC tournament already. Wow, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool stuff. It's wild, in fact, to be able to do that with still 4 games left in the regular season, because then it just takes some of that pressure off, and then I think you ultimately play better. And of course, I hate to say this, but I'm going to. Carolina has lost these 3 games at Georgia Tech, at Syracuse, home to Clemson. If Carolina had only lost one of those, had one at home against Clemson, RJ Davis gets that foul call at Georgia Tech and you end up beating them. Even if you had lost to Syracuse last week but won the other 2, Carolina would be 14-1 right now. And here's the thing with that. They would already, with that record, have clinched a top 3 seed in the ACC tournament. Isn't that bonkers? But that's revisionist history. Obviously, that didn't happen. It's just like that could have happened, and the Tar Heels would already have a double bye. Wild stuff. But it can be, as I said, achieved on Saturday. One other thing before we get out of here, Carolina hosted Elon in baseball on Saturday. Pretty crazy game. The Tar Heels got out to a 3-0 lead. Elon then put up a 4 spot in the top of the 4th, and it's like, of course, I hate those kind of things. But then, bottom of the 5th, our man Vance Honeycutt, so good to have him back from that injury last year. Line drive oppo shot for a grand slam. You love to see it. Carolina has a lead, and then the teams exchange single runs later on in the game. Elon gets 2 in the top of the 8th. Carolina is able to get out of it, and then basically nothing much doing in the top of the 9th. Carolina holds on for an 8-7 victory over Elon, moves to 4-0 on the young season. Way to go to the Diamond Heels. Let's keep going. I'm excited about this baseball season, and I hope you are as well. Friends, that's it for today's episode of Locked On Tar Heels. Thanks so much for joining me. It's been great to be together. Coach Rob is going to be with me on Thursday's show. We have another listener mailbag question to get to, so looking forward to that. If you're not part of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord community, as always, I want to encourage you to come join us there. The link's in the show notes. It's free to join, and it's seriously popping off all day long. It's a great time to be part of it. If you haven't subscribed to the show on video and audio, would encourage you to do that so that you always know when episodes are dropping, when videos are dropping. Also, if you hit the bell, when I go live, like post game or whenever that is, like we do on Saturday after the Virginia game, you will get a notification that I'm going live, and then you can hop right in. So make sure you hit that bell. Smash the like button if you're watching on YouTube so that we know you are here. I want to remind you that it is always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again tomorrow. Can't wait to do so. But until then, peace.